We're sitting here on the 10th floor that's where the commissioners sit. There's been a view from the 10th floor going down to the staff saying, we don't want this stuff to move forward. And now that's flipped.
So we know that Trump's interested, and we can debate as we just did.
Wait a minute. Were you sitting in Gary Gensler's old chair, Zach?
I was. Admittedly, I was.
Okay, I couldn't help let that go. Go ahead, brother.
I had to take the throne over, John. We will by force. We will take the throne back for the people. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Coinage. I'm your host, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City. Happy Mother's Day, belated Happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. Not sure how many mothers watch Coinage necessarily, but maybe some husbands do, some moms do. And that is why we start the show the way we do. It's a good show for you today because we're going to have John Deaton on the show, former Massachusetts Senate candidate who went up against Elizabeth Warren in that state. Elizabeth Warren now very much in the news as the stablecoin bill stumbled last week, and going to discuss kind of where we go from here, as it's pretty important to the continued momentum, not just in DC, but really in the crypto markets, as things are turning around quite a bit. Over the weekend, headlines around the U.S.-China trade update there. Where's our run of show, Texas? We got topics coming up. There they are. We're going to have John Deaton on the show. Also, an update around Play Button as our burn continues on that front. Another 40 million plus tokens burned. Going to dig into a little bit of that after we chat with John. So we'll tease ahead to that, as well as another buy from Michael Saylor and the strategy team to talk about there as well. But we're going to start the show a little bit differently this time, because as we pull up the Bitcoin chart, certainly worth watching that. And like I said, we'll talk about the strategy buy, but we're going to start the show with the middle child of crypto, Ethereum, getting a shout out this time around because we're back above 2,500 as crypto catches a bid. And Ethereum, if you haven't noticed, has been outperforming Bitcoin, which is a new trend. We haven't seen that too much. And if you look at the longer term trend chart, which I think we got, Texas, that's the other one to look at here, in terms of this is a big move to the upside over the last week. When you zoom out, we've seen this play out before. When you zoom out, you do have the ETH BTC chart. It's been, beaten down. We've certainly covered this. This is only a year chart. If you zoom out, it looks even uglier. But we've seen this potentially hit that trend line before and not break out. A lot of people, though, are saying this time actually could be different. We teased ahead to this last Monday's show. We talked to you about the upgrade that Ethereum had, potentially being a catalyst to get to this point. That was right. So shout out to us for being right last Monday. And now as we hit this trend line this time, you have to squint, but it truly could be different. And there's another chart to pull up here as well, because Peter Brandt, one of those, fundamental analysts when it comes to not just crypto, but really all kinds of things. He's been around the game for a very long time. Used to come on with me back at Yahoo. Perhaps we should have Peter on Coinage to dig into this chart. But as he says here, he normally does not like talking about ETH or saying anything positive about it. But even he is saying that, look out, if you can break out from this level, then you've got yourself setting up for what he is saying is a potential moonshot. And so, again, just highlighting here that if these moves do continue, you generally do like the setup. And keep in mind, that was back when he was talking about 2150 on this chart, and we just showed you here. We're well beyond that now. And so we start the show there because increasingly smart analysts are calling this move out, and it's one that I will give myself credit for talking about last Monday as potentially basically the prime setup for all this. And as we showed on that chart, that was back when ETH was back near 2,100. And so thank you for watching Coinage today, but if you watched last week, you'd be in a much better spot. So worth highlighting that, I think, this time. Let's shift back to Bitcoin, though, because as we always do on the Monday show, usually we're talking about a Michael Saylor buy, and this Monday is no different. When you look at that chart, potentially being boosted by another Saylor buy. And this time around, it was kind of in line with what you might expect in terms of that being, par for the course for Michael Saylor. It was another 13,000 plus Bitcoin being purchased this time around for more than $1 billion, which is, seemingly large enough to get people amped yet again when it comes to these things. Because, sometimes in the kind of shakiness that we saw before, people were saying, hey, look, Saylor's not buying as much. And they were kind of somewhat down when you think about where things go for Michael Saylor and how bullish he's feeling. I wouldn't say he's taking the foot off the gas pedal at all when you think about these things, because as we just showed on the Saylor tracker chart, it's still stacking up. And again, we've talked a lot about his debt raises, his equity raises. We can show the headline from the blog if you want to. His debt raises, equity raises, and his continued persistence in terms of playing that out. And this fits into the overall strategy, I think, no pun intended, because if it does start to move higher, oh, hello, ad. If it does start to move higher, you would expect to see, again, the recursive nature of a lot of that happening, where Saylor doubles, triples down, and that's kind of the strategy that he's communicated. It's just a question of how big will we see that move to the upside here. If you listen to Raoul Paul and some of the other macro thinkers around this, you're seeing a big boost in the public markets today. Not so much in Bitcoin itself, which I think is pretty fascinating, because we saw the decoupling on the downside when stocks were getting crushed off the trade headlines. And now on the flip side, Bitcoin up only 0.1% as stock markets are rallying off the news. Of course, since crypto trades on the weekends, maybe Bitcoin just got ahead of itself in terms of, again, kind of being the main thing to trade around those weekend trade headlines. But pretty interesting if you think about kind of the ETH outperformance, Solana approaching 180. A lot of these altcoins having not participated in a lot of the rally up until this point. So you got a lot of people now. We highlighted this back in December. Maybe it was a little bit of a head fake false start, given all the trade stuff that not a lot of people saw coming, but could potentially be. And this is the next call. If you thought our call from last Monday was good, the next call is that potentially altcoin season could truly be here. Worth probably taking a look back on our interview with Pantera, Cosmo Zhang, Coinage member, and who I call the Warren Buffett of crypto, calling out the fundamentals that will matter here and the projects that he likes, setting up into altcoin season. But I highlight that because potentially we are getting not just into this decoupling that we saw before, which was Bitcoin and the stock market, but for altcoin season to potentially have its next kind of rally here, you'd expect to see somewhat of a decoupling around alts and Bitcoin, which you're kind of seeing today, perhaps the early innings of that. At least if ETH is to be kind of the bellwether of what's to come, ETH outperformance, as we just showed on that chart, could potentially be signaling that you're going to see that play out here and continue to play out here if ETH is the one that leads the other alts. Granted, of course, this is all coming at the same time that they just had their Pectra upgrade. And so how much of it is tied to that versus how much of it is tied to the swinging of, some of the anticipation around alt season. There's one more chart to show on this, and this kind of puts a button on it, is Bitcoin dominance potentially continuing to go down. 62% is where we're at now. Before, we were looking at 65%, which if you zoom out on this chart was, I don't know, what was at the highest since we've seen going back to January 21. So, when you put all those pieces together, this is also, again, you could say, Zach, this is dumb. Why are you showing us the ETH BTC chart and then showing us Bitcoin dominance back to back? Aren't they kind of the same thing? And yeah, they kind of are. But I think that this is an important one to show because we saw a little bit of this head fake before in terms of Bitcoin dominance coming down here, and that being a fake start to the altcoin season here, and we saw what happened. And now potentially, truly actually starting at this time around. So I highlight all of that because I guess we'll see if I'm right. We'll see if altcoin season really is starting now. And partially what we're going to be hosting on the show moving forward, of course, if you're just tuning in for the first time here on Coinage, our Monday shows are tied more to news recaps and digging into it with smart guests, which John Deaton is going to be joining us in just a sec. But But outside of that, more of the shows are going to be tied to these projects that are shaping up for altcoin season 2025, which ones are best positioned. And if you ask our community of, again, decentralized opinions, decentralized bag biases, that's where Coinage is a bit special in the sense of we're in all of this together. And if you listen to our community, as we always do, we highlight the best projects, crypto project of the year we do in Q4. We might have to start pulling our audience on maybe potentially getting their take on the best plays for summer altcoin season 2025, just to make sure we're all thinking somewhat similarly. We saw last week, by the way, one of those things that we do hold in terms of the Coinage treasury, a Doodles NFT, that one might not have played out so well because if you look at that chart right now, it's been interesting to see some of the way that these NFT tokens have traded. And we saw this with Pengu from Pudgy Penguins. We saw it with Anime's token launch from the Azuki NFT project. And with Dude, I think this is an interesting one to talk about. We didn't highlight it too much last week because I was kind of curious to see what was going to happen here. And if we bring that one up, it's always tricky to kind of show a chart for a meme coin that just started trading, and nobody knows that better than Coinage, as we're going to talk about later on with Play Button. Sometimes it is a bit deceiving. And with this one, I kind of do put Doodles into the same camp. We had Austin, their head of community, on not too long ago around the lead up to this launch. And if you look at the floor price for Doodles NFTs, they're down quite a bit. And this is, again, the trend that we normally see in terms of usually you see a pop in the lead up to a token launch. You see the NFT, which entitles holders to the meme coin, fall off. And it kind of looks like the way that a dividend stock trades, which I think is always interesting to highlight. However, in the case of Doodles, we didn't necessarily see a huge pop in the NFT for Doodles. And sometimes maybe that's just because, these things play out each time. And sometimes maybe it's because, you've got waning interest in a lot of these because performance hasn't been so hot after the launch of these things. But I do think it's pretty interesting to kind of compare the way that Doodles did launch and, the muted interest among holders here. But it might be too early to say that Doodles is cooked. I just want to highlight that because there were a lot of people in our community asking about these launches and whether or not that trend of NFT projects on ETH launching Solana meme coins will continue, at least for the time being. If you look at this launch, perhaps some of the steam coming out of that trend. But I do want to shift to the more macro theme that we have been watching around all this, because in DC, I really do think that it's not one of those stories that you can ignore. And who better to chat about with this on today's show than the man who ran against Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts, John Deaton, back on Coinage with us. John, it's so good to see you, man. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, brother. It's always a pleasure to be with you, Zach.
Yeah, it's coming at a hot time because a lot of people had expected this vote, the Genius Act and all the big pushes in DC on stablecoins to be a walk in the park. This is one that we saw both Republicans and Democrats rebuke the Biden administration for the way that they handled crypto before he left office. And now this was a vote that was expected to pass, but it failed. What do you make of kind of this rejection down in DC, and how important is it to you, John?
Well, listen, this is what my biggest fear, Zach, was. Remember, I was afraid that we'd go from one extreme with the government's neck on the industry, on the industry's neck, to this free for all and nothing gets done. And I'm fearful that we're going to have this nothing gets done strategy played out, because in Washington, how do we go from the two co-sponsors of the stablecoin bill voting for it out of committee to then voting against it literally a day or two thereafter? And it's politics as usual. And Elizabeth Warren raised her, I don't mean it literally, but her ugly head of anti-crypto army. And it's all about President Trump. And let's just call it like it is. It's about President Trump They're upset about the meme coin. The Trump family is all in on crypto or world liberty. The stable coin associated with world liberty went from like 100 and some million to 2 billion market cap. Even though it's less than 1% of the total market cap of stable coins, it's
Sure.
still, she was out there saying it's like the seventh or ninth largest. And this was a repudiation of Trump, and the family and the Democrats just went ahead and voted against it. And it's really sad. And we could talk more about it, but it really is sad to me.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because I'm trying to tease out how much of this, and you're much smarter at this than I am because I've never run for office, I've never played politics before. But we were down in DC chatting with Hester Peirce recently to advocate for what Coinage is all about and some of the other DAO co-ops trying to build here in the US. So we'll play a clip of that interview in just a second. But before we do, I want to stay on the focus with Congress, because to me it's important, and just to kind of highlight it, it was 49 senators voted to advance the bill. They needed 60, so short. And as you said, kind of interesting to see, some Democrats who supported it shift anti, but also interesting to see some Republicans as well shift anti. Josh Hawley and Rand Paul also voted against it. And so that to me is also interesting in this. And I'm trying to tease out what pieces, because you're right. We've been highlighting here on Coinage why the Trump pieces, it's kind of surprising that it took so long for Democrats to kind of wake up to all this. But it happened. And now on the Republican side, I think there's also pieces tied in here to even Tether. We talked a little bit about some of the carve-outs for foreign stablecoin issuers now potentially also being a piece of this, because they gave them some time to kind of work around some of the rules that will apply to some stablecoin issuers, but not to Tether. So, I mean, I guess in all of this, on a scale of 1 to 10, John, how much of a gut punch is this for the crypto industry? Because this one was supposed to be a walk in the park, and market infrastructure, the bigger one, was supposed to be next. And if you can't even do the stablecoin bill, kind of how important do you see this as the stumble happening now?
Listen, let me temper what I'm about to say. That I saw a post by Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, who was more optimistic than I am. And you would assume that obviously he has his ears and eyes closer to the Washington grind that's going on. But you're right. The stablecoin bill, the Genius Act, was the layup, right? It was a layup. It was a dunk. Fast break dunk. It's going to be done. President Trump was going to have it passed. They were talking about before the end of May, and then finally it was August. But I think it's a serious gut punch, because the market structure bill is a more complex bill. And if they can't get the layup done, what's that say about the market structure bill? And we got to realize, I think right away after the election, I started bringing up the midterms, because I said, listen, I know it sounds crazy, but before you know it, the midterms are going to come around. We're going to be a midterm election season, and absolutely nothing's going to get done. So a year from now, it'll be just 6-7 months from the 2026 midterms. No legislation is going to get done at that period of time. And so we really have this critical period of time. And I know President Trump has said, one big, beautiful bill where we get market structure and we get stablecoin. But, I'm not optimistic that's going to happen.
Well, I also wonder too, I mean, like I've been pretty critical, and I'll say that I'm critical only because there are real consequences. There are political consequences to every move. And this one to me kind of looks like there was so much goodwill that had been built up. Going back, by the way, even to Patrick McHenry in the House side of things, discussing with Maxine Waters for so long to kind of get stablecoin bills done. They failed back then, but they seemed like they were working in cahoots. They were working with each other. It was bipartisan. We saw, as we said, the rebuke of everything that happened before with Gensler's SEC from both parties. You're feeling good. Everything's feeling good. We're sprinting here. And then, like you said, Trump not only launches the meme coin, which is one thing, but then works on USD1 to launch his own stablecoin around and before the launch and real big push in DC to get the stablecoin bill done. At the very least, I don't think it's too crazy to say, hey, maybe you do that after the stablecoin bill gets done, because doing it before, if you're a Democrat, it almost becomes the political calculus, John, to me, seems like you just can't touch it. It becomes like a too much of a lightning rod for a Democrat to be like, yeah, we support this, even if it is helpful for Americans.
Right. Listen, and we've got someone, Richie Torres, right? He is a young, a Democrat who is pro crypto. Yet he put forth a bill that could be a poison pill, a de facto poison pill of the stablecoin legislation. And that bill was that no president or family member can have a meme coin. And then you have Qatar now talking about this jet that they're going to donate to the president. It's going to be Air Force One for a while, and then it'll be going to his library. And you've got Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren talking about how that's violating the emoluments clause. And then you have people saying, wait a minute, this deal with world liberty is with Dubai and Abu Dhabi, however you say it.
Yeah.
And foreign nationals is really what I'm getting at. And so it could be a way national security is at interest, conflicts of interest, appearances of impropriety, all this stuff. And I think goes to your point, Zach, of which at some point crypto is going to be back to Republican versus Democrat. And that's the last thing we want is technology to become such a partisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's happening. And it's unfortunate because we're at a time where the stablecoin bill really shouldn't even be looked at as a crypto bill, but it should be looked at as a bolstering of the US dollar bill, of reassuring that the US dollar is the world's reserve currency at a time when US treasuries are not so attractive to companies in foreign world countries. If we pass the stablecoin legislation, 99% of all stablecoins are US dollar based. That
Mm-hmm.
will promote the US dollar. It'll be like having a savings account, right? On your phone in US dollars, even if you're in China, if you're in Brazil or wherever.
I agree.
We're losing it because of this nonsense. Now, on one hand, listen, I was very critical of the Trump meme coin. I wasn't a fan of it. I had the same reaction like you had, like, oh no, not now. Let's not snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, man. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, listen, the Trump family owns golf courses. Are we never going to have legislation that involves golf courses? Are we never going to have legislation that involves real estate? When you have a real estate mogul, it's less than 1% of the market cap. So we don't like bite the nose to spite the face, right? But
It's true.
but we're talking politics, so logic is thrown out the window.
Well, I mean, logically, you can make the inference too, right? And I've been looking at this. We just chatted with Paulo Arduino, the CEO of Tether, not too long ago. I mean, like, it is correct. That is a very small portion of the stablecoin market right now, USD1, that is. But should this bill happen, it becomes, I think it's not too crazy to say that it could, like, literally overnight with President Trump's connections and how he wants to implement it, it could basically jump beyond USDC. I don't think that's crazy to say. And USDC, I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head, but like half of Tether's market share. Like, USD1 could blow up in a way that does suddenly become, again, pretty huge for Democrats to not necessarily want to just sign off on willy-nilly. And so
Yep.
I do wonder, John, I'll press the issue a little bit here, because I respect that you also, when you ran, it was just kind of like, hey, look, this is technology. We should support it regardless, because, as you said, America stands to either move ahead or fall behind. And with these moves, to me, it seems like Trump had the call and put his own personal crypto endeavors beyond and ahead of, and this was my fear back in January when he launched his meme coin, put him ahead of everything else. And so how much of this now deserves to be laid at the feet of President Trump in terms of, this becoming political?
There has to be some responsibility. Again, I'm trying to be fair because of what I said. Obviously, just because the president's family is involved, we didn't see the Democrats scream, with Hunter Biden and the millions of dollars from, China and Burisma and all of that stuff. There's always been this issue of revolving door in Washington where family members of the president, are using their influence and cashing in. It's not unique to President Trump and the Trump family. But at the same time, you've got to read the room. And President Trump is a lightning bolt, man, of polarization. And, when you add all of these things, the Qatar, with the plane, and you have the meme coin, and you have people out there saying, look, 80% is insiders, and you're having a dinner at the White House where the top wallets of the Trump coin are coming and getting access. And then you've got this claim of foreign people, giving money backdoor through the stable coin of World Liberty. I mean, if you're an objective person, you're going to say, let's not do all that, right? Let's just not do that. And let's move forward with what's in the best interest of America. So, so I'm with you. I'm an objective person. At the same time, Democrats and Republicans need to put the country first. We're facing a de-dollarization that we haven't faced before. You're talking about BRICS nations and things that are settling for the first time contracts in oil and other things in non-US dollar denominated currencies. And this is a way to really bolster it and get it home. And so I'm with you. Like I was at the crypto ball, and it was about, my phone was blowing up. It was about, I don't know, 12:30, maybe close to 1 in the morning. And are you in on the Trump coin? I don't do meme coins, to be honest with you. but I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Trump coin? And then of course I was like, oh man, this is not gonna play well with politics.
That's the thing. But let's shift to the other side too, because I would agree. I mean, I think there are a lot of great builders, and he's a lightning rod, and so many people talk about it. But there's so many other projects that are working, and Coinage is one of them. Again, we were just down in DC chatting with Hester Peirce. I want to play a little bit about what we heard from her, because there's another crypto roundtable which will be streaming live on Coinage later today. But that is one issue, and that is one area where the SEC and Paul Atkins coming in now. Whole other agency. You got, bipartisan kind of forces at the SEC, but a huge flip in terms of what they can do to help America and founders such as myself building with this technology to try and thrive here in the US. And it was encouraging to hear from her kind of how the SEC is potentially going to throw some fuel on the fire here now. Just want to play a clip of what she told us down in DC. Yes, it's related to Trump, but the SEC's got its own agenda. Here's what she told us.
We're sitting here on the 10th floor that's where the commissioners sit. There's been a view from the 10th floor going down to the staff saying, we don't want this stuff to move forward. And now that's flipped. And you're seeing really enthusiastic engagement from the staff trying to figure out some of these very difficult problems.
Now you have Chair Atkins here. 1 to 10, how confident is Commissioner Peirce feeling about these changes continuing at that pace?
Well, I mean, we're trying to move as quickly as we can. I think this is really an important thing for me to get things done quickly, but also it's something that the administration more generally is interested in moving forward quickly.
So we know that Trump's interested, and we can debate as we just did.
Wait a minute. Were you sitting in Gary Gensler's old chair, Zach?
I was. Admittedly, I was.
Okay, I couldn't help let that go. Go ahead, brother.
I had to take the throne over, John. We will by force. We will take the throne back for the people, which is important. But it was weird. He was over my shoulder the whole interview. We're going to be releasing a full kind of dig into why we went down. But no, the question there, John, is going to be, it's exciting because whether or not it's the SEC, whether it's the state race, by the way, which I have pulled up because New Hampshire just enacted their first Bitcoin bill that could potentially see the state throw a significant amount of money into Bitcoin. I mean, how excited are you beyond it to kind of look at the flipping that's happening here in the U.S., Crypto Task Force being pro-crypto, states waking up to this? I mean, outside of Trump and what's going on in D.C. with the stablecoin bill, what does John Deaton say about everything else?
I think it's the most asymmetrical bet of my lifetime. You could talk about other tokens, obviously Bitcoin. I mean, we've got to sit back and realize that you have states now racing to strategic Bitcoin reserves to be implemented. It's a great time. I think that, if we just focus on Bitcoin for a minute, it's less risky today, Zach, less risky today at $104,000, $105,000 per Bitcoin to own Bitcoin than it was 5 years ago when it was, 30,000 or 20,000 or whatever it was. And so it's a reason to be excited. And, the fear is that nothing gets done legislatively And because any Trump's executive orders, can just be redone, in 2028 if the Democrats win and it's an anti-crypto president, or it's a president that has Elizabeth Warren has, his or her ear, and they just, write a new executive order negating the last executive order. We don't want to go back. We can't keep flipping back from, anti-crypto, pro-crypto, anti-crypto. So, the missing piece is this prolonged legislation that will make it difficult, even if a new president comes in a few years who is anti-crypto. Even if Senator Warren is the Senate banking chairwoman, because the Senate flips to Democrats, we would have this legislation that moves us forward. That's what we need. And so it's still a great time, obviously, to be in crypto. You and I, we've been in a while. We would have never guessed that there would be the 180 that we saw. We just wanted a president and an administration to be neutral.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was hoping for. And there's times I wish it was still back to neutral,
Yeah.
or to just be neutral. But I'm optimistic, and I think it's a great time to be in the industry. Let's just hope that Brian Armstrong is right, and this is just part of the process. And let's hope that the Democrats who co-sponsored the bill will get back in, and those Republicans like Hawley, if they're worried about big tech, for example, then let's get some amendments in and get 60 votes and get this thing done.
Yeah, I think, I mean, on that front, it is kind of encouraging because at least, I have so much respect for Hester Peirce and now being the head of the crypto task force, because that's all she was asking for as well for years under Gary Gensler was, hey, we should just be the tech merit neutral regulator that we're supposed to be and just judge things on those fronts rather than kind of dig into whether or not it's good or bad from our perspective. And again, you were kind of the leader in the charge representing so many Ripple holders in that case versus the SEC to kind of reach victory there. And now to have her kind of, again, not saying like, hey, we should be pro-crypto, but just be pro-liberty and kind of write the rules in a tech merit neutral way. That has me excited because you're right. That is exactly why we went down to DC to talk to her about what we're building, because all we're building, as Coinage is a Colorado registered DAO co-op, is trying to bring cooperatives on chain, which is awesome because co-ops have existed for forever, but they're very inefficient because they're kind of rooted in these old tech ways of like literally writing down. If you go to REI, by the way, you become a co-op member, you kind of got to fill out these memberships. It's a pain in the ass, but if you can put them on chain, everything's more efficient. And so for us, that's the exciting thing too, is that like, okay, if we can get the recognition, if the SEC can realize that this is exempt from securities laws and just say it, which is what we're fighting for, like how many businesses in the U.S., co-ops in the U.S., can supercharge things by using blockchain tech? And so, I don't know, that's our fight, and that's what we're taking down to DC. I think it's exciting for us and exciting for builders in the U.S. But obviously, I'm bullish on what we're building. My next question for you, John, is what John Deaton's bullish on now, because as you said, you've been in the space for a really long time. What's caught your eye as you've kind of reassessed, stepped back, looked at the crypto space to say, hey, these might be the opportunities people should be paying attention to now? What has you most excited?
Well, I think that stablecoin legislation, if it gets passed, is going to explode. So there's reason to be optimistic. You have people like Brad Garlinghouse, and Ripple, who are projecting the stablecoin market cap to 10x. You have Bank of America has said that 1.2 trillion dollars will be by 2030 in stablecoins. So that's an incredible amount of growth. I think we're entering the utility era. And I've been a fan of obviously, I disclosed when I ran for Senate that I was 80% of my net worth was in Bitcoin. It's a little bit less now because XRP's outperformed so well, but I'm still like 70% in Bitcoin. So I'm all in. And I think that the industry fought, Zach, for its survival for the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, talking about Hester Peirce, let's go back to 2018. 2018, Hester Peirce wanted a safe harbor provision that was going to give guidance, and it would grandfather folks in, and we could give guidance that says, here are some decentralization markers, and if you meet these markers, then you're not a security. And of course, that was wiped away by Clayton and all the others who were not ready, and then we got Gensler. But there's a reason, to be excited, and I'm excited in those things. And I think that we're going to see lots of things go on chain. You have Larry Fink and others. We're talking about the guy who has 11 trillion under management, talking about the tokenization of real world assets, and that everything, stocks, bonds, real estate. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about crypto. What I was going to say is we fought for our survival. Now we're fighting for our legitimacy, Zach. Zach, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the fact that real estate's so expensive, people can't afford homes, but you could still own, fractional ownership in the apartment building that you live through tokenization. I mean, there's so many exciting things that could help lift people and expand the middle class. I've always been a believer in the promise of the technology. I just hope we fulfill that promise.
That is a very, very good point. And I think, just to loop those two things together, I see it as the same way, especially in New York, where tokenizing buildings, you can call it tokenizing buildings, but basically that's what co-op buildings in New York do, is that the people who live there actually own the building. And it's very different than BlackRock coming in and buying up all these buildings. And so I'm kind of caught in both camps too, because I'm excited about, obviously, if you own the tokens underlying these chains, more money moving on chain, token go up, you benefit from that. That's cool. But if the tokenization aspect doesn't necessarily change anything about the old ownership thing for the actual thing it's tokenizing, then to me, that's a little bit less cool. So I'm looking at it through two lenses. And that, to me, whenever we talk about real world assets, I get so much more excited about tokenizing assets that have never existed before. Kind of like what we're doing, where people come into an NFT and co-own a media outlet. Like, that has not existed. Normally, it's billionaires who control and own the media.
Right.
But a new opportunity to kind of own something that you couldn't own before, that I'm kind of getting excited about from a real-world assets perspective that, like, I think can change the game in a new way for ownership, like you said, because so many people are priced out or just don't have access to things that rich people do. And that, I think, is kind of where crypto started out from. That's kind of why I assume you got excited by Ripple and XRP and everything else, is like, okay, ownership back to the people. And that is a narrative that I think, weirdly enough, hasn't been talked about a lot in 2025 as all of this has changed. It's all been everything else.
100%. And listen, the wealth gap has never been larger in the world, in the United States. The top 1%, they own 90% of all the wealth in the world, including in America. We have to do something about the wealth gap in this country, the evisceration of the middle class. We have to bring it back. And I view, it's not going to, solve it all, but I view crypto and blockchain, tokenization, the things that you and I are talking about, where people who have been excluded, from purchasing or building wealth may have an opportunity to build wealth. That's the reason that I'm excited. Always been excited. It's taking a long time, but I'm hoping I'm hoping that we're going to eventually, meet that.
It has taken a long time, and I think, again, that's where I'm still in the fight here too, and it's an honor to have you on, John, because you kind of led that fight for so long, and appreciate you making time again for us on Coinage per usual, man. Thank you again. This is always fun to have you on.
It's always great to be with you. I look forward to being on again sometime. Okay.
Right on. Very good. John Deaton there, former Massachusetts Senate candidate. Appreciate making the time there, John. We'll continue here with the one last thing we had to highlight. And again, hoping, I'm going to share my thoughts there too in terms of what John said, hoping that we will see some of the politics in D.C. We knew this was going to happen. This is going to happen. Some of these things take time. Hoping that on the other side of all these battles, we continue to see the tech and progress continue for everybody, not just Republicans or Democrats, but really, honestly, for everybody caught in between here. Because John's right. I mean, this is a very important bill, and it's one that a lot of people were excited for, and seeing it all play out the way that it has, very tricky for people now being like, what the hell? We had this one. This was a gimme, and not so much a gimme anymore. So we'll be covering it per usual, and also going to be covering the roundtable that is coming from the SEC later on the day in just a few hours here, a couple of hours. But wanted to close the show because we're talking a little bit about what we have coming up here as well, opportunities in the market. One of those things that I feel like is happening here is that sometimes opportunities, as we talked about, can look different and sometimes can confuse people because, as we just heard from John, some of these things take some understanding, whether it's kind of a new token launch, whether it's something that's trying to do something differently. And to close the show, we're going to pump our own bags here. We're going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing, because this is the announcement that we had shown just on last show, but we keep hitting it because I think it is part of our jobs to educate people around why these things are different. And we made another announcement over the weekend that Coinage did, in fact, as we always say we will do, had our monthly burn of play button tokens. Now, again, meme coins have suffered from some problems. Let's not kid ourselves here. We talked about that with Hester Peirce. By the way, our full episode on why we went down to DC is going to be coming out this week. So keep eyes peeled for that one, because the interview is live now. You can go watch that one. But as far as the reason, backstory, who we were in the room with to meet with the Crypto Task Force, the first, as she told us, time that someone met with the Crypto Task Force and then turned around and interviewed Hester Peirce, an honor to be the first. You know, walls are made to be crumbled down. Records are made to be broken, Texas, as they say. And that's what we did. But part of that is also our meme coin that we launched, Play Button, to be burned based on the views. If you watch this, congratulations. For the month of May, that view is going to count towards the Play Button burn that comes next. And it's something that I think, a lot of people don't necessarily understand about how these things function. In meme coin land, this is a little bit different. We started this thing. We had a lot. People were like, hey, how come Coinage controls all this? You have options. We can either distribute that to people or we can just burn it. And I think this is exciting because it's the first content bonding curve in meme coin land. And so increasingly, we will be burning more. We burn more based on how many views we get. So if you watch Coinage more, we burn more tokens. The estimate for the month of April was 75 million. We didn't see as many views as we thought we would. You didn't do your part. So we only burned about 40 million on that. And we're going to be doing this monthly. So if you're waking up and just realizing, hey, what if a meme coin did things differently? What if you took the best parts of content coins, merged them with meme coins? Well, guess what? That's what we're doing with the Play Button. Do your own research, not financial advice. At no point did I tell you to buy it. However, if you want to, that'd be good for the Play Button community. Anyways, that is the update there. You can learn more at coinage.media. And as always, you can co-own Coinage with us, myself, alongside the co-founder of Netflix, Mark Randolph, and a lot of other smart people in crypto as well. Key differentiator, as I always say, another piece of education. It's not like other DAOs because it's one member, one vote. There's no token shenanigans happening on the backside here. It legitimately is decentralized because that's what co-ops are. We're just bringing them on chain. So if you want to learn more and join the fight with us, you can head to coinage.media. It would be an honor to have you in the trenches alongside myself and the rest of the community. For now, though, that'll do it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be carrying the SEC chat live on Coinage. You can check that out if you're not following us. If you're not smashing that like button to help people see this, if you're not retweeting it, what are we doing here, folks? Co-own the first Web3 media outlet that actually is Web3. And we'll see you in the token-gated Telegram. For everybody here at Coinage, I'm Zach Guzman signing off. We'll see you again soon.